Run Pure Sports Friday night Hardwood. Welcome, everybody. Go ahead and hit the like button for us. If you're not already a subscriber to this YouTube network, then please go ahead and do so. And if for some reason you're still not a subscriber to Run Pure Sports, go ahead and use code NEWYEAR15. You could try New Year. That would probably work as well. And go ahead and join us. We've got 7 games on this slate. Of course, the cancellation of the Warriors games due to the tragic situation there. But 7 games, full slate, including a 10 o'clock and a 10:30 game. We will get into all that. If you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat here because we'll be able to get to them on a relatively quiet Friday, DC. We've got a couple of games that, outside of maybe an upside player in tournaments or two, we're not going to be all that interested in. It really boils down to 3 games that I think are going to have the heavy condensed ownership and some of the interest and intrigue with some news that dropped just a little while ago about one of the later games, but it's Friday. And by the way, DC, I don't know if you know this, but the real estate industry is just exploding here at Run Pure Sports. We've got a lot of people with a lot of interest. We've got people taking the test. I'm sure that David Torres is going to be here, but how has your week been? It's been freezing here in Atlanta. I was in Dallas. It was pretty cold there. What's going on in lovely Denver, Colorado today?
Yeah, warmed up this week a little bit, at least after the brutal weekend, which sucked with the rambunctious 7-year-old puppy. But, we got through it and have had a fun week here. Coming off an interesting night in the NBA, I thought I made a good, game theory-esque moving off of an 86% owned Marvin Bagley, which is like, for that large of a slate, it has to be one of the highest ownership percentages of all time. I did it mostly, obviously, due to the ownership, but also, Bagley himself has been one of the least reliable players in NBA, and then the Wizards, right? They're just the rotations, you can't trust them. But it was looking good for the first 8 or 9 minutes of that game. He had 3.5 fantasy points, but they just wouldn't take him off the court. He just stayed out there the entire game, ended up smashing. It was unfortunate because I had also 100% Jalen Brunson. He went off for nearly 70. I saved a spot for TJ McConnell. He had a big game. So I got most of the other stuff right. And I was kicking myself because our good friends over at Sabersim, I've been running the Sims recently, and he was in all my Sabersim teams. I, of course, X'd him out and played donkeys like Chris Dunn, who got you 7 fantasy points instead. And so that kind of sunk my night a little bit. I stand by the decision for the most part, but that was last night. On to tonight, another fun night in the league. I think they're all fun, but I do think this is an especially good slate. And then really, really fun weekend of sports coming up. Obviously, with the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, can't wait for that. We got the return of a big UFC card tomorrow. We'll be back with the crew for MMA fans, 12 Eastern time. Me, Mad Lab, JSU, and Red Kachik will be on. And just an awesome time for sports. Good time to join Run Pure Sports, and excited to break down this NBA slate with the two of you guys.
It was definitely the highest owned that I think Marvin Bagley has ever been. And I heard it was a situation kind of like with Wembanyama, where he was like, I'm just going back in the game. You can't stop me. And then he did to just absolutely dominate. So a good performance from him. And I saw that, and I agree with the game theory. Just didn't work out for Gary Trent Jr., certainly, who I played even with the
I had him too, yeah.
But Bryce, it was a good night for you, even with the Chris Dunn play. You had a bunch of lineups that had a chance to take down to 15, ending up in the top 5, and then a couple of others just outside of the top 10. How's your week been, and how are you doing on this lovely late January Friday afternoon?
I'd be a little better if I was 6 figures richer and one of those teams had hit. I think I was 1-2 for the majority of the night. And then I had a team chasing that finished 2 points off. So I kind of got middled there pretty hard. I was under on Bagley. I think that was the only really bad under I had. My best team ended up having Chris Dunn. I finished 4th with an 8 from Chris Dunn. So that's never fun. If
let me address this comment. I want to address this comment. Chandre says Bagley won me some cash. Bagley didn't win anybody some cash. He was 86% owned. So, you did have to have him to win cash for sure. But, he himself didn't win you anything because you're holding hands with the entire field, right? That was kind of the whole thesis, I guess, behind the fade. So I'll leave it at that, but I did need to address that comment.
The way he won you cash is that he was so cheap that he let other players win you the cash. Like Scotty Barnes was the guy who went out and did it. Jalen Brunson was the guy who went out and scored 70 for you. But, getting the cheap plays right's half the game, and then getting those guys right's the other half. So, I was under on Bagley as well. I just didn't take quite as big of a stand as DC did on it. I think I was about 50%, on the dot, both sites, which FanDuel, that was exactly on the number, and DraftKings, it was under.
Vooch, another guy that won people some cash in that good matchup there against the Raptors. So definitely, I think the point though, right? The point, guys, the point is that you can have a Chris Dunn in your lineup if you get the upside in there, and he was cheap enough. You can have a guy who I saw there were some good lineups that had Gary Trent Jr. in there. I had a lineup that was pretty good. Everyone else in flames except for Gary Trent, but I didn't have the top upside guys. So the point is, you can cash. You can do very well, even if one of your guys goes absolutely busto in the NBA on a slate like that. But tonight we've got a bit of a different slate because it's not that we're going to be looking at only 3 plays, right? Last night it was Bagley, it was Trent, it was GG Jackson that people were just auto-populating their lineups with before looking at the rest of it. Tonight, we have decisions to make. We have quite a bit of value. There's some value that's going to be popular, like Jeremy Sochan, and then there's some off-the-board value that I think we can get to here on this slate. And, of course, we'll talk about the news that's going to come with the injury reporting for the Pacers and Trailblazers game. At least one surprise there with Anthony Simons getting downgraded. I'll talk a little bit later about what I actually think that move means. And then, of course, the Pacers refusing to have any transparency as to whether or not Siakam and Tyrese Haliburton are going to play. But that's our job, to go through this, determine what we think is going to happen. And we'll get started right away with the first game of the night. The Spurs visiting the Hornets. Charlotte actually favored here, DC, by 4.5, 235.5 total. Last time these two teams played, it was an absolute beatdown of the Spurs. That game was in San Antonio. But of course, tonight, the Spurs are going to be missing their most electric part-time player. And I say part-time not because he's resting tonight, but part-time because he only plays like 24, 25 minutes a night. Victor Wembanyama is going to be out here, as well as Sidi Sissoko for the Spurs, so don't click his name. Zach Collins is going to be back for them, probably on a ridiculous minutes restriction. And the rest of the injury reporting, Gordon Hayward is out. McGowan's, Brandon Miller, Nick Richards, which I think is big news here because of how good this play is against the Spurs. And Dominic Barlow questionable as well. DC, a lot of people in the Discord talking about LaMelo Ball. He looks to be fairly low-owned considering the slate and the spot. Of course, he's a few games back from injury. But this one has to have some interest in some pieces. We know all about the rotations and the minute restrictions on the San Antonio side. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, oftentimes for DFS purposes, the very best games to target are games between two bad teams, right? Which this game is, especially two bad teams who are especially bad on the defensive end, who play at a fast pace, who turn the ball over. All that stuff applies to both the Spurs and the Charlotte Hornets. You see it with the 235 total, which is, relatively high. Actually, like the over in this game, expected to be relatively close. Charlotte favored by just a few points. And then you have the injury news on top of it, right? Important players out for both teams. Gordon Hayward for Charlotte, Victor Wembanyama, obviously, for the Spurs. And then potentially more guys for Charlotte. I mean, McGowan's, Brandon Miller, Nick Richards, all questionable. Barlow questionable for the Spurs. I mean, depending on the news, if most of these guys end up sitting, I think you can make a case for almost all the starters on both sides of the ball in this game. And I think, if you want to get off to a hot start in some of these tournaments or whatever, you can stack this game because I like LaMelo Ball, 8,800. He seems too cheap to me. I've been close to pulling the trigger on him the last couple of slates, haven't quite done it. They have been blown out 3 games in a row since his return, which has kept his minutes somewhat in check, right? 27, 30, 31 minutes for LaMelo Ball. But I don't. If you look at the rotations, there's no restriction on LaMelo Ball right now. He's good to go, I think. So assuming this game stays close, which I think it will, I think we'll see LaMelo Ball out there like potentially close to 40 minutes. I think is very possible for LaMelo Ball. I like him. You would think that Ball's coming back from injury would have kind of killed Terry Rozier. It hasn't really been the case. Rozier's retained his usage, still getting assists. He's still doing a lot for this team, I think, and the price has come down. So 7,200 for him looks good. I think Miles Bridges is a decent play at 7,100 in this matchup. And, even a guy like PJ Washington, if Nick Richards misses, right? Because we already have Mark Williams out. If you take Richards off the court, like they might end up starting PJ Washington. I don't think you need to worry too much about Zach Collins defensively for the Charlotte Hornets, so they could go that route. And then Zach Collins, I mean, if you told me he was going to get 30 minutes, I think he's an awesome play at 5,700. Devin Vassell, Trey Jones. You can make a case for Jeremy Sokan, I think looks good at 5,200. I really, really like this game to start this slate off. I'm usually hesitant to load up on too many players at the first game of the night, especially when we got a relatively decent-sized slate overall. But I'm in on this game. Now, to what extent does depend on some of these injuries. And if we get, a hard minutes limit on Zach Collins, I'd be hesitant to go there perhaps. But overall, yeah, I'm hoping some of these Charlotte guys sit because I want to fire on this first game of the night. I think it's a really good one. I do agree LaMelo Ball, the best play in this game, but I don't think you need to stop there. This is a game to target for me.
Takedown 78 came here for you, Schlong. He says you're the man. He's excited that he gets to hear what you think of the Spurs and Charlotte. And look, I think starters are important here. I think price considered the best play in this game is probably Jeremy Sochan. Makes me nervous to say that, but 5,200 only power forward eligible on FanDuel, on DraftKings. But what are your thoughts here on the Hornets and the Spurs?
Yeah, Sochan's one of the best plays on the board, hands down. He's super cheap. He's kind of in like the Spurs gadget role where like he's playing in lots of different pop rotations. And, Wemby only helps with that. You're going to see a lot of guys pop from this game in your lineups early. I'm normally a little worried about going 2 in on a game early, but you already have some of the biggest news of the slate. Trae Young's already out. Atlanta's going to be good plays later. And then you get Indy, Portland. Brogdon will be a good play. You have a lot of the news in already to kind of fire on some of these early guys. So I'm going to be a little more exposed than I normally am to an early game here. I like LaMelo a lot. Rozier's 7.2K. You've seen DraftKings kind of come down with their pricing a bit in terms of how stringent it's been all year, where it's a little bit easier to fit some of these guys in. I feel early in the season, they wouldn't have dropped Rozier's price until his production had dropped. But now they'll preemptively drop it because LaMelo's back in. So people it brings him back into play. It's a little more dynamic and, something that I really do kind of appreciate, actually. I think PJ Washington's the best play in this game if he starts and you get Nick Richards out. You could easily see them match up with him at the 5 a ton here. And PJ just prints money for you when he's playing minutes at the 5. Mm-hmm. So that would be my absolute favorite play here, but that's kind of conditional on him starting. I'd expected him to start last game and he didn't. But the Spurs are a little bit different of a matchup without Wemby. So you might see him in there today. And that's news that we will know.
All right, go ahead, hit the like button. We'll pick a number here to get to pretty soon. To Kid 1982, thanks for joining and tuning in. And now you can go fuck yourself is what you can do. The next game on the slate is Philadelphia at Orlando, 222.5 total here, Bryce. Philly favored by 5. For Orlando, Gary Harris, Franz Wagner remain out. Jet Howard and Kevon Harris are going to be in there just in case things get wild. On the Philly side, Mo Bamba, Robert Covington, and DeAnthony Melton are still out. Daniel House is off injury, and Jaden Springer is questionable. Pretty low total. I didn't see all that much I was interested here. If you're getting into MMA and you're playing a bunch of lineups, Wendell Carter Jr. at 4,500 is someone that you may look at just in case you're not excited about some of the other cheap center plays. But what are your thoughts here with the Magic and the 76ers?
One of the absolute worst games of the night, and I think the field knows it. You get a relatively healthy Philly team with Joel Embiid. Embiid's the focus there. I'll keep some Maxine GPP just because he's going to be like completely unowned. Other than that, I don't have a ton of love on the Philly side. Like Tobias Harris, 6'9", like Oubre at 5'8". I'm not eliminating these guys from my pool, but they're not guys I'm actively trying to put in. Same goes for these Orlando guys. You finally get Banchero up to 9K. I don't think there's going to be many people playing Banchero at 9K over, say, LaMelo at 8.8. That's just not a thing people are going to do. It's not something I'm looking to do here. So just for that reason, I'm going to keep Banchero in there. But, he's not really a play I'm super excited about. As you mentioned it, there's not tons to like here. If you wanted to go cheaper, you could look at someone like Wendell Carter. You can look at someone like O'Keefe. You can look at someone, and I hate saying this, but like Joe Ingles could get there. He's only 3.7K. I think he's like type of fringe guy on the slate that'll like make my pool at probably lower than the field. I think some people do go to him here, but shitty total. Two teams that play good defense. You get an overpriced Magic team, and a Sixers team that has Embiid back. Little hard to fire on this game.
It's a good point on O'Keefe. If he starts again at 4,200, the minutes have been up here, but we're not starved for value, DC. Guys in chat are asking about Markelle Fultz. I know he's 4,900, but my goodness, there are at least 6 or 7 better guard plays, in my opinion, on this slate than Markelle Fultz with the multiple guards that the Orlando Magic roll out there. Sure, guards have had some success against the 76ers, but just not a play I'm finding myself getting to. What about your thoughts on the Magic and the Sixers?
Yeah, echo most of what Bryce said. I'm going to be in on the Spurs and Charlotte game, which is the other game that locks in this first window. There's the 2 games. And I don't want to have my entire lineup, finalized, not able to react to any news after the first 2 games. So if you're playing a bunch of Spurs and Hornets like I plan to, you're going to avoid some of the, kind of questionable value pieces, guys like Fultz, O'Keefe, Joe Ingles. I'm not going to be filling out my lineups with those guys, considering I like a ton of the kind of the mid-range plays in the Spurs and Charlotte game. So I'll be very, very low on this game. The one guy that I have no problem playing whatsoever, though, is Joel Embiid himself. I think he's by far the best play on either team in this game. I really do think he's just completely matchup proof, right? Home, road, fast-paced, slow-paced. Like, I know this game's slow-paced and better defense, but like a slow-paced game for Joel Embiid is fine, right? He does all his damage in the half court. He's not getting out in transition and running. And I don't think Orlando has anybody that's going to slow him down. So, yeah, I would expect Embiid to get his 70 fantasy points like he does seemingly every single night. So I think he's still an awesome play. I don't know how much I'll get. It kind of just depends on, what the value pops up, what my team builds look like. But if I got the space for him on a team I otherwise like, I have absolutely no problem playing Embiid. Everybody else in this game, barring unforeseen news, probably going to be a pass for me.
The only thing I would argue with is Embiid absolutely loves to shoot the rock from beyond the arc. It's one of his favorite things to do, but he does make his living in the half-court game. So hit the like button. Moving on to the next game. Another game that I think if you wanted to take a shot on a low-owned upside guy in a tournament, some of these guys are fine. But other than that, it's a little tough to get to some of these guys given the health of these teams. At least it's a higher total, 234 total here. DC, Boston favored by 7, welcoming the Nuggets into the Garden, and got 2 fully healthy teams. Nothing here to report, and that makes me just a little bit less interested in any of the plays here. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it should be an awesome game of basketball to watch. But I guess kind of it's the inverse a little bit of like Spurs and Charlotte, right? Where that one's going to be sloppy, not the best basketball, but I think probably way better point per dollar wise. When you look at the individual players that Denver and Boston will be. So I'll be checking this game out as a fan of the game, but as a DFS player, I don't really see going to a lot here. I doubt we get any news. I think this is a game that both teams are going to want to win. Potential finals preview, obviously, between the Denver Nuggets and Boston Celtics. And even the Joker, I definitely prefer Embiid. They're pretty much the same price tonight. I'll take Embiid. I think he's got the better matchup. I prefer Joker when he's at home. Not that he's a terrible play if you want to go there. I think he'll be super low owned, but I'm on the Embiid side. There's no way I can personally fit in both into my lineups. And Boston, when they're fully healthy, they're not really a team I love to target either. They're just too expensive, kind of across the board when there's so many guys that can go get buckets for that team. So, yeah, second game in a row here that I'm lower on. I do think that's kind of a theme of this show, right? There's, like you said, 3 really, really good games to target. Some of them on the later, so you do kind of have to keep some spots open, in my opinion. This is another game that's going to be awesome from a real life basketball perspective, but DFS wise, probably mostly going to be a pass for me.
Bryce, I mean, I agree with everything DC said. As I'm looking at this game, and I'm like, maybe I want to play a guy, and the one price that does stand out to me is Derek White at 6,100. He's had some really, really good games. Now, guard is loaded, but 6,100 for Derek White, who's just been really, really good this season. And we've seen guards have success against the Nuggets. We've seen that the Nuggets defense is weaker away from Denver. What are your thoughts here on the Celtics and the Nuggets?
Derek White's for sure making some of my teams tonight at 6.1. I think price adjusted, he's by far the best play here. That I had 2 takes in this game. I had written down. That was one, and then the other take is that the Stars could get a little more run here, just because I think it's a game that both teams want to win. As DC said, like kind of finals preview, complete inverse of like the Spurs Charlotte game, which is just really good fantasy sloppy basketball as opposed to like really good real basketball. So, I'm definitely keeping the studs in my pool. None of them become priority plays to me. I would lean towards White and then like the super expensive guys like Tatum and Jokic as kind of like who I'd be going to. I think it gets a little away from like Jamal Murray type of game here at 8K. Like I think it's easier for Jokic to make a winner, if he drops like 70 or 80 than like Murray, going out there and getting you 40. Now, if Murray gets you, I don't know, say 50, just because like everyone's gonna be on DeJounte Murray. If you do it with Jamal, nobody's gonna play him. So like these are the type of guys that like can make like a huge difference for you, like a Josh Giddey last night. Guy kind of sucks. He plays second fiddle a lot, but he can still go out and get you 50. I don't eliminate guys like that from my pool. But none of these guys are priority plays. Derek White, if you're looking for one, is it?
And Giddey at the same price point last night, right? It was 6K for Giddey in that matchup against the Jazz, 6,100 here for White in a game that we think is probably going to stay close throughout with a decent total. So I like that quite a bit. Move on to the next game. 3 in a row here that I don't think we're going to have a ton of interest here, Bryce. Phoenix heading into New Orleans. New Orleans favored by 237 total. The only news here is Bull is going to miss this game once again. But again, 2 healthy teams with priced up, expensive players. They each have a big 3, big 2, if you want to say, in New Orleans. Tough for me to really get to anything here. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a little bit easier than say like the Denver-Boston game, just because, you don't have the guys priced over 10K or at 10K with like Tatum and Jokic. You saw Ingram come out and have an absolute monster game last time, dropped a triple-double at like 0% ownership. Mm-hmm. I don't really see him doing that against the Suns here. Seems like a better real-life game to me than fantasy-wise, but, been a common theme of this show. I'm not eliminating the studs here. Like I don't dislike them to the point where like they won't make my pool. This is just the typical type of night where like I really condense around value plays and then get to rotate like the mid to top tier guys. So, you'll see me have Durant, Booker, Ingram, McCollum, Williamson, and Beal probably all like around like 8 to 12% or something like that. Maybe even like those are like some of the first guys I'd knock down if I need to make room for other players that I like more. But like that's kind of where I'd start out with those guys and then move around. We'll get to some of the value plays for you guys here, I think probably the next game. But yeah, upper mid tier. Don't love anything cheap here.
The next two games are going to be much more exciting. So if you have questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. DC, Phoenix, and New Orleans. Do you make it 3 of 3 with not having a ton of interest in this one?
Yeah, I do think this game will be somewhat defensively minded. I do like the under here. I know it's a 237 total, but another game where both teams are going to be playing hard. Both teams have all their stars healthy. And it's just hard to, have a strong take on any of these guys. I think the fact that the stars are healthy pretty much eliminates all the value, especially when you talk about some of the value we've got on teams we've already talked about and teams we'll talk about later on in the show. So those guys are pretty much off the table for me. So it is, I echo what Bryce said, just the stars. But like, even a guy like Ingram, yes, he's coming off a 68 fantasy point game. Before that, though, 27, 22, 22, 36, 18, 37, 28, right? It had been 6 games before he'd gotten anywhere close to paying off that 8K tag. And it was against the Charlotte Hornets last game. So, like, I don't want to pay the 8K for Ingram. Kevin Durant playing at a high level, but it's 40 to 50 fantasy points every night. That's not going to get the job done, most likely at 9,200. I think Booker is my favorite stud in this game, or Booker on the Sun side and then Zion down at 7,500 on the Pelicans side. I think they're fine plays. Again, guys who, if they're the last guy in your lineup, but got a team you like, I'm not forcing them out by any means, but there's no one in this game that's anywhere close to a first guy in. No one in this game that would, for me, get close to making a cash game type of lineup. So, yeah, I'm lower on this game as well. I don't have any problem with really any of the studs in this game, but no priority plays here for me.
All right. Who would the Bucks trade for Murray? I'm really disappointed that the Hawks are getting rid of DeJounte Murray and not Trae Young personally. So I'm hoping that maybe they don't find a good offer here and they can reevaluate that. But speaking of the Hawks, DC, this is a game that is very, very interesting. Of course, the news triggering a lot of that interest. Trae Young being ruled out. The Hawks are already without DeAndre Hunter, Vit Krejci, and Wesley Matthews. On the Miami Heat side, we've got Jaime Jaquez Jr., who is doubtful. Kevin Love is off injury, but Duncan Robinson was a midday downgrade. He is now questionable. The Miami Heat are favored by 7. It's only a 222 total, but DC, the Hawks don't play any defense as it is. Now we have the injuries on the Hawks side. Can I interest you in a 4K Kyle Lowry, DC? Can I get you to play Kyle Lowry on this slate? What are your thoughts on the Hawks and the Heat?
I'm not planning on playing 4K Kyle Lowry, but obviously not the worst play. And I do think this game is interesting from a game stacking perspective because the Atlanta guys, are just such good values really across the board. This is a team that plays a very tight rotation all the time, right? Last game, they played 8 guys total. 13 of those minutes were the 8th guy was Garrison Matthews, who does absolutely nothing on the court. Then it's Clint Capella and Okongwu pretty much splitting minutes at the center. And then, beyond that, it's usually Trae Young, but then Murray, Jalen Johnson, Sadiq Bey, Bogdanovich. So Trae Young out, you'll see almost for sure, I think, Bogdanovich slide into the starting lineup, which brings him down to 7 guys. Now, they'll dust off, a Hunter or who else do they have? A Trent Forrest or something like that. But where the production is coming from the Hawks. It's from their main guys. And even their one bench guy that you can consider, Okongwu, right? He's still going to come off the bench here, but he's going to be one of the more popular plays on the slate because for whatever reason. He's all the way down at 4,300. Probably going to play 25, 30 minutes in this game. I think he'll play alongside Okongwu or Capella at times, rather. And you can play him power forward as well, which is an advantage. So all the Hawks look good to me. I think DeJounte Murray is probably my number one, but Bogdanovich, Sadiq Bey, Jalen Johnson, Okongwu, those 5 guys I think are all very, very strong plays. I think you can play for sure 3, maybe 4 in the same lineup. And if you're doing that, you might want to have some heat on the other side, right? So, yeah, I mean, a Kyle Lowry, Tyler Hero. I think Bam Adebayo is a sneaky play in this game, playing well right now and has played the Hawks twice already, averaging 52 fantasy points per game, 8,700 for him. I think makes some sense. I think he's got 60 fantasy point upside. He'll go low owned, I imagine. So a really, really strong game here. Obviously, mostly on the Hawks side, but I have no problems with Hero, Butler, Bam Adebayo, a cheap Kyle Lowry. Hawkes is going to miss this game, so that does open up some opportunity. Really, really strong game here. It's just a matter of how much Atlanta do you want on your team.
Bryce, obviously people interested in DeJounte Murray and Bogdanovich, but Jalen Johnson has been really, really good this season, in particular when Trae Young has missed games. He's a legitimate third option here, but really closely bunched to Murray and Bogdanovich. And then on the other side, you're going to see much lower ownership on guys like Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo, as DC mentioned. What do you see in this Hawks Heat game?
I see tons of Bogdanovich chalk, and I think it's good chalk here. Bog starting in the spot, 5.6K is, super hard for me to fade. I'm considering a lock button on him. The issue is it kind of dictates what you can do with the rest of your lineup, because I want to be over on guys like Jalen Johnson. I think he is probably the most overlooked guy here, just because, you'll go with your cheap Hawks, you'll go with Bog, Sadiq Bey, and then you go with Murray and be like, oh, all right, that's enough Atlanta. I think he's the first one that goes overlooked from this game, just because people are going to go with the name value in Murray. And while I do love Murray, I think Johnson should be up there in terms of ownership, and I'm just not seeing it right now. So, price and ownership adjusted, he would be my favorite play here. Okongwu becomes a very strong play in my opinion. I think those 5 are kind of the cutoff for me with Atlanta. I don't really see Trent Forrest today. He's 3K. I would much rather pay the extra 1 or 2K and drop down from a Jokic to one of these 8K players, or a LaMelo Ball, and play Sadiq Bey or someone like that instead of dropping down to Forrest here. And then on the Miami side, their studs will pop a bit, just because people love doing game stacks, and they'll think they need the run backs with Hero, Bam, Butler. Thing is, it could be so spread out with Miami and these prices that you don't need a run back with the Atlanta guys. If you were choosing one, my preference is Hero. I know it eats up another guard spot, and you guys really want to play the guards today, but Hero would be my favorite of the 3. Then Bam, then Butler. I think Lowry is fine for cheap, and I think a super low owned Duncan Robinson is not the worst play here without Hawkes in there.
All right, we need to get to 133 likes for the plays of the day. So we got a little work to do. We've got 2 games to do it. And Bryce, the next game is going to be 2 hours after the Hawks and the Heat tip off. And of course, because it's Friday night in the NBA, there's big news in the game that tips off 2 hours after the most popular game. It is Indiana, the Pacers on a back-to-back, head into Portland. Indiana favored by 6, 236.5 total. And I'm going to make it easy. Basically, everyone in this game is questionable, with the exception of Isaiah Jackson and Andrew Nembhard, who have been ruled out. Pascal Siakam is probable to play. DeAndre Ayton is probable to play. The ice has melted, thankfully, in the Pacific Northwest. And Matisse Thybulle is off injury. Anthony Simons was a midday downgrade. And my thought process here, Bryce, I think this is a showcase game for Malcolm Brogdon. I think it's a showcase game for Jeremy Grant, perhaps. And I think it maybe even is a showcase game for DeAndre Ayton. 3 guys that could be on their way out of Portland. And maybe the Blazers want these guys to have some big games to drum up some interest in those pieces, get some draft picks back for a team that's going nowhere. The Indiana side, we've got to wait and see if Tyrese Halliburton returns tonight. If not, you've got another situation where TJ McConnell becomes a great play against zero defense that the Blazers play. What are you thinking of doing with this game, and how many pieces are you going to save to wait and see what happens with the news?
Quite a bit. That's why we've been kind of telling you to lay off some of these earlier games that we weren't quite as high on, like Charlotte and San Antonio, good, obviously. Atlanta, good. And then the late games, good. If you end up, say Halliburton plays and you're expecting to play some of these Pacers players, it's a pretty easy shift over to like D'Angelo Russell type of guy. He's been playing a ton of minutes. I think Malcolm Brogdon, like just straight up, is one of the best plays on the slate. He's starting at 5.4K against the Pacers. I mean, as bad as Portland is, they'll run with the Pacers in this game. This is the perfect type of like sloppy, bad, high-scoring basketball that we love. The trickiest situation for me right now is to break down the Indiana situation for you guys without some of the news. Like, we don't know about Halliburton. We don't know if they're going to be putting Siakam on any kind of minutes limit coming in. I assume that he would be on some kind. Like, I don't think they're going to throw him in the fire, as a franchise cornerstone. They're not that bad of a team. They're not like the Wizards that need someone to eat 40 minutes at the center position. So I would assume that Siakam plays around 30. Now, if they said that like he's all systems go, and I'd be more than willing to play some Siakam here against Portland. It's kind of play everyone against Portland at this point. But yeah, you have seen a more condensed rotation from Portland if they're trying to trade some of these guys and then, still get skewed his minutes. So I could see Grant. My favorite play on Portland, though, is definitely Brogdon. And, I think that he's fine to like pivot a ton of your shares to. If you don't, say Halliburton plays and that kills your McConnell play. Like, I think it's super easy to swap down to Brogdon there, or swap up to Russell a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, you could just 1-for-1 swap Brogdon if you absolutely needed to, but he would be my preferred pivot here.
DC, I think that Brogdon is number 1 and Jeremy Grant is number 2 in this game, pending the news on the Pacers. I don't think I'll get to DeAndre Ayton myself just because I like some other centers. But what are your thoughts here? We got a lot of news to come, but at least on the Portland side, if you expect Simons to sit, you could talk about the Portland side, and then Indiana is going to be Indiana, right? And to Bryce's point, I would suspect that the way that this team plays, it's hard for me to see Pascal Siakam playing 34 minutes in his first game.
Yeah, really hard to know what Indiana's going to do. Starting with the Portland side, I'm not paying the 6,800 for DeAndre Ayton in all likelihood. Maybe on the late slate or showdown, but not on the main slate. He's missed almost a month. He seems like someone who potentially could kind of, I don't know, just the bigger dudes, right? I worry about them missing a month and be able to come back and run with a team like the Pacers. So I'm off of Ayton, but I think Brogdon is a strong play, even if Simons is in there. If you take Simons off the court, at that point, Brogdon becomes, maybe the top value overall on the entire slate, or right there, kind of with some of the Hawks guys. So he's an awesome play. He's going to be in my initial lineup almost certainly. I'll be kind of hoping Simons sits, but I'm not going to move off Brogdon, even if Simons is in there. If Simons is out, though, Jeremy Grant at 6,800, I think is an awesome play in this matchup. I think the style of matchup against Indiana is absolutely perfect for the way Jeremy Grant wants to play, get up and down the court. Not that he's going to necessarily do this again, but he did put up 54 fantasy points in 37 minutes the one time that these two teams played earlier this season. So, yeah, he does have obviously a strong history in that one game. And they'll need a scoring if Simons is off the court. So I do think Grant is the one actually most affected by Simons. Obviously, Brogdon to some extent too. But both those guys are awesome plays. And then on the Indiana side, one of my better takes from yesterday was keeping a spot open for TJ McConnell, because we talked about it on the show, Bryce. Like, Nembhard had like an actual name for his injury, right? A thoracic spine sprain. Like, I don't think you're going to play with that on the first day it pops up. He's already ruled out, unfortunately. So I think more people will be kind of planning on playing McConnell in this game. I do kind of think that Halliburton comes back, though. I kind of think Indiana wanted to debut Siakam with Halliburton out there. Just, I don't know, just a hunch that I had. So we'll see. Obviously, if Halliburton plays, that really lowers the appeal of McConnell. But if he's out, I think, guys like Buddy Hield, Mathurin, they're really short at the 2 and the 3 positions are Indiana, depending on if Nesmith misses out as well. And then, Siakam himself, like, he's a guy who can kind of run an offense. He can create shots for himself. He can get to the basket. And in this matchup against Portland, I wouldn't be surprised if they just said, yeah, go do your thing, Pascal Siakam, go play 35, 36 minutes. Again, not a guarantee, but I think he's got potential at 8,100 if you want to have an off-the-board play. Probably someone I'll have a decent bit of on the later slate is Pascal Siakam. So Indiana side is kind of more wait and see what happens with the injuries. But you can have Portland guys. And then, the next game we'll talk about, Brooklyn and the LA Lakers. I think plenty of reasonable plays there too. So I can't do it on every team, but where I can, I'm trying to save 3 or 4 spots for these last 2 games and then kind of swap around based on who's in, who's out. If you need, what positions you need upside from based on what happened earlier in the day, how your team's sitting, all that stuff. You'll have all the information that you need, right? Because these 2 games start 2 out, like the previous games before this will be done or close to being done before these 2 games start. So you'll have all the information you need to make the proper swaps in these last 2 games. I do think it's a good move to keep, at least 3, 4, 5 spots open for these last 2 games. I think you'll be sitting pretty good if you get the early games right and you have spots open for these last 2. So really good, kind of a fun slate. I'm glad DraftKings left these last 2 games on it.
All right, we are 34 likes away, so go ahead and hit the like button. Beanair is recycling compliments that he made to others, which is just downright insulting. 34 likes away, and that was one of the favorite things I've heard this week, DC. If a guy has an actual condition and not just an injury designation, it's a little bit more concerning in your eyes. So I
don't know what that is, but it sounds like a thing you're not going to get over after like 10 hours. So I don't know.
It sounds something like you would be in the ICU for, is what it sounds like. It does not sound like you're going to come and play an NBA basketball game if you've got the thoracic spine syndrome.
Yeah, exactly.
It's concerning. It might be something that's borderline on paralysis. So hit the like button. Some news here for the early games. Bryce McGowan's is out. Brandon Miller is in. And Jaden Springer is out tonight as well in that Philadelphia-Orlando game. DC, you were talking about this next game, Brooklyn and the Lakers. Lakers by 7, 224.5. Michael Bridges said he is going to play tonight, so we have that news. Day'Ron Sharpe and Ben Simmons remain out. Anthony Davis probable, LeBron James questionable. What else is new? Cam Reddish is out. And perhaps another showcase opportunity here for D'Angelo Russell. The Lakers trying to move him, trying to find some team that wants D'Angelo Russell. I can't see it being a contender myself. But to Bryce's point, he's been playing a ton of minutes. He's actually been playing well. And then you have Austin Reeves priced down at 6,100 against a Nets team that really, let's face it, is just in complete and total disarray right now. Those rotations are literally impossible to peg. What are you looking to do with this game? You said there were some plays that you thought in this one.
Yeah, the injury to Cam Reddish has really kind of opened up some opportunity for the Lakers, role type players. I prefer basically everyone outside of LeBron and Anthony Davis, who I think are both fine plays. I do prefer Anthony Davis between the 2 studs. He's just been so good this season. Good matchup here against Brooklyn. you can expect 60 plus out of Anthony Davis at 10.2K. I think he's a great stud to spend up. He'll be the Lakers stud I would be much more likely to go to. But honestly, the rest of the Lakers who are going to get significant run here all look good to me. Russell at 6,200, I think is a good play. We've seen Reeves' price tag come down. He's been, a little bit pedestrian recently, but at 6,100 in this matchup, I have no problem going to Reeves. I definitely prefer Russell to Reeves if you're choosing between the two. And then I think some good value on the Lakers. Not the most exciting value in the world, but Taurean Prince probably going to get about 30 minutes in this game at 4K flat. I think he's a perfectly fine play, as is Jared Vanderbilt at 3,500, about as cheap as we see viable plays in DK NBA this year. He's going to get, looks like, between 20, 25 minutes against the Brooklyn Nets at that price point. Guy who can do a little bit of everything. I think he's perfectly fine, especially if you need to kind of swap things around late, want to get on more of the studs, whatever it may be. So, not guys that are priority plays. Even Christian Wood at 4,100 is a guy who can easily pop off for 25, 30 fantasy points in any matchup, including this one. So, I like the Lakers. There's no super priority plays here for me with the Lakers. I think D'Angelo Russell, my favorite play of the bunch. But all these guys are perfectly reasonable guys to swap to if you need to chain things around late or if you're playing the late slate. So I'm in on the Lakers much more so than the Brooklyn Nets. I don't mind Bridges. He's my favorite play on the Nets, but they do have a lot of guys healthy right now. It's kind of hard to know outside of him where the production is going to come from. I think Claxton, kind of a tough matchup against the Lakers. I do think the upside is there for him at 7K. But yeah, Bridges is the guy I'm looking at on Brooklyn, and then the Lakers side of the ball I think is really, really nice tonight. So like I said, pretty fun last two games to finish the slate.
Excellent. Bryce, just to remind you guys that are in chat, you've got this half a game essentially to ask any more questions that you have, and more importantly, get about another 25 likes to get us to the 133, because otherwise we'll just go and we'll start making lineups, Bryce. That's how it goes. LeBron James is 9,500 in this matchup tonight against the Nets. That's about as cheap as I can remember him being. And he's going to be 11% owned. And because we have all this value in the early games, potentially, and I think no matter what with Brogdon in the Portland game, but what are your thoughts here on the Nets in Los Angeles?
I think it's super reasonable to go high-low with some of this value. You get one of LeBron or AD, and then you play some value. And if the value is not there, you can swap more towards mid-tier guys. You've seen a really condensed Lakers rotation here. Ham is coaching for his job. The Lakers are playing for their season. LeBron does not want to waste another year of his career. So you've seen them kind of turn things around like they do a lot of the years. And, if Russell's, playing these minutes and he's going to take 20 shots a game as one of their primary scoring options, he's a good play. He's simply too cheap for that role. If Austin Reeves is going to play, and keep in mind, these guys lost 5 to 6 minutes last game because of their blowout against Dallas. They all would have been playing 36 to 40 minutes here. So with the current rotations they're running, TC brought up a good point about Reddish being out. Helps that really condenses the plays here to the top tier and the mid tier guys. So I think they're great options on their own. I think they're great options if you want to pivot off some of the Indiana guys, like say Halliburton's in. He's not going to play a full allotment of minutes. What that does is it kind of torpedoes everyone on Indiana because he takes up so much of the fantasy production from them. So, I think the Lakers are a really good pivot on them. And then, you get to the Brooklyn side of the ball. They don't have anyone that's super expensive here. I think Bridges is a decent play, just in a vacuum. He would be my favorite guy on Brooklyn by far. Then, I don't think Cam Johnson is the worst play. Cam Thomas, not really doing it for me, but I don't think he's the absolute worst. You're just kind of playing roulette with some of these guards to an extent. Talked about this game a little bit more than I wanted to, but that's because there is a decent showdown for it tonight. I would kind of like keep it. I might just go 50% Braun, 50% AD, and run like my top 150 teams here. Would kind of be my strategy towards it. I just kind of find it hard that one of them is not optimal.
Are you focusing more of your interest in this game on showdown? How many players from this game are you considering for main?
I mean, the main MME. I don't want to be below the field on LeBron or AD here. So from 15 to 25%. I think AD goes extremely overlooked on FanDuel, where he's 11,500. The price gap between him and LeBron is significant there compared to what it is on DraftKings. And, that makes some sense because of the scoring system and how well he picks up stocks. But, I'd like to be over on both of them on the main slate, and Russell for that matter.
All right. We didn't quite get there. 127. We needed 133. It's probably, honestly, because Travis J. Mangone, realtor, has done something with the other realtors. I haven't seen any of them here. I think he buried David Des Torres' body somewhere in between Texas and Florida. I'll let you guys vote whether or not we give out the plays of the day, because every now and then it's okay to show violence and say that, look, we have standards and you need to meet them, but it's close. It's close today. What do you guys think?
I mean, you saw me with Big Bertha. I'm a man of no standards, so I'm voting to give the people the plays of the day.
That's it. I can't deny that. Bryce, seems like you're probably in agreement.
Yeah, I need some good karma after bouncing around the top 5 last night to finish in 4th.
All right, here is to a better beat tonight. David S. Torres is buried at Beanair's estate, so that's very interesting. All right, DC, the Mom's Basement play of the day.
Yeah, we'll call it the no standards play of the day today. We'll make a one-day exception. I'm going to the first game of the night, and I'm going to Mr. LaMelo Ball. I think he pops off for 60+. Highest scoring player overall in the entire slate. Best Joel Embiid, best the Joker. Going to be guarded, I think, by little tiny Trey Jones. And we know LaMelo Ball just likes to bomb away from 3. I think he can get off his three-point shot whenever he wants in this matchup. I think he puts up a monster score. LaMelo Ball, the no standards play of the day.
Little tiny Trey Jones.
He's an inch taller than me, so maybe I should. I did look up his height to make sure, but yeah, he's small compared to LaMelo Ball. I'll say that.
All right. I'll go next. I'm going to give you a play that I love that I just don't know how much I'm going to get to. It depends on how things shake out with the guard positions. Then I'm going to give you the play of the day. The play that I love, the play that I think is by far the most underpriced play on the slate is Derek White. Derek White in a good matchup, good total, 6,100. But the play of the day is a guy who I think is going to be showcased tonight by the Trailblazers. That's Jeremy Grant. You're going to get him in under 10%. Bryce, who is your play of the day?
Since we're going no standards, I'll give you a cheapie here. Onyeka Okongwu. I think DC's right about him having to step in and play more minutes here. He's one of the best fantasy point per minute guys you'll see out there. If he gets close to 30, really opens up the rest of your team.
Okongwu is also one of the most underpriced plays on the slate. Beanair, that is, I can't lie. That's generally true. But good luck in your contest. Get on into the Discord. New Year 15. Use that. And listen, we hope that someone, if it's not us, takes down a big contest tonight. As DC said, he's on tomorrow for the MMA show. And we've got a ton of content for the NFL and MMA. So go ahead and join it at runpuresports.com.